Mommy, that's Daddy! My 5-year-old son's voice cut through the airplane cabin like a knife. I turned to look where he was pointing, and my blood ran cold. There, 3 rows ahead, sat the man I'd buried 3 years ago. The man who'd supposedly died in a car crash. What would you do if your dead husband walked past you on an airplane? Stay with me because this story will challenge everything you think you know about trust, love, and the people closest to us. Make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. You won't want to miss how this unfolds. Let me start from the beginning. My name is Lisa, and 3 years ago, my world fell apart when I got that phone call. The police officer's voice was calm and professional, but the words he spoke shattered everything I thought I knew about my life. My husband, Jake, had been in a terrible car accident. The vehicle had caught fire, and his body was burned beyond recognition. They identified him through dental records and personal belongings found at the scene. I remember that day like it was yesterday. Tommy was only 2 years old then, too young to really understand what had happened to his daddy. I had to plan a funeral for a man whose body I couldn't even see one last time. The closed casket sat there in the funeral home, and I kept thinking this couldn't be real. How do you say goodbye to someone when you can't even prove they're really gone? The insurance money helped us survive those first difficult months. Jake had a good life insurance policy, and while I felt guilty about using the money, I had no choice. I was a single mother with a toddler to raise, and my part-time job at the local library barely covered our rent. The money from Jake's policy allowed me to go back to school and get my nursing degree. It wasn't easy, but I was determined to build a better life for Tommy and myself. For 3 years, I carried the weight of being a widow. I wore my wedding ring for the first year, then slowly started taking it off. I went to grief counseling and learned how to talk to Tommy about his father. I showed him pictures and told him stories about the man who loved him but couldn't be with him anymore. Tommy would ask questions like all children do, wondering why Daddy couldn't come back, and I'd do my best to explain death in terms a little boy could understand. Dating felt impossible. How do you explain to someone new that you're not just single, but widowed at 29? A few men showed interest over the years, but I always found excuses to avoid getting serious. Part of me felt like I was betraying Jake's memory, even though everyone told me he would want me to be happy and move on with my life. So, there we were, 3 years later, finally taking our first real vacation together. I'd saved up enough money to take Tommy to visit my sister in Miami. It was his first time on an airplane, and he was so excited, pressing his face against the window during takeoff and asking a million questions about how planes work and where all the cars looked so tiny below us. We were about an hour into the flight when it happened. Tommy had gotten bored with his coloring book and was looking around the cabin, watching other passengers. That's when he suddenly perked up and pointed toward the front of the plane. "Mommy, that's Daddy!" My heart stopped. I looked where he was pointing, expecting to see nothing more than a stranger who maybe had similar hair color or build to Jake. But when I saw the man sitting 3 rows ahead of us, my entire world tilted on its axis. It was Jake, not someone who looked like Jake, not a resemblance that a child might mistake for his father. It was definitely, unmistakably, absolutely Jake. The same dark hair with that small cowlick that never stayed down. The same broad shoulders. The same way he held his head slightly tilted when he was reading. Even from behind, I knew it was him with a certainty that made my hands shake. "Honey, that's not Daddy," I whispered to Tommy, my voice barely steady. "Daddy is in heaven, remember? That's just someone who looks a little bit like him." But Tommy shook his head with the stubborn certainty that only a 5-year-old can have. "No, Mommy, that is Daddy. Look at his ears. They stick out funny just like Daddy's." I felt like I was going to be sick. Jake did have slightly prominent ears, something I used to tease him about lovingly. It was a detail so specific that Tommy couldn't possibly be making it up or projecting onto a stranger. I spent the next 20 minutes trying to get a better look at the man without being obvious about it. I pretended to need something from the overhead bin, walking slowly past his row. I got up to use the bathroom twice, taking the long way back to my seat. Each time I saw him, my heart pounded harder. There was no doubt. It was Jake. He looked exactly the same, maybe a little more tan, his hair slightly shorter than he used to wear it. He was dressed nicely in a button-down shirt and khaki pants, reading a business magazine. On his left hand, I could see a wedding ring, but it was on a different finger than where he used to wear the ring I'd given him. The woman sitting next to him appeared to be his wife. She was pretty, probably around my age, with long blonde hair. She kept leaning over to show him things on her phone, and they'd whisper and laugh together. The easy intimacy between them made me feel sick. At one point, she fell asleep with her head on his shoulder, and he gently stroked her hair. I sat back in my seat, my mind racing with 1,000 questions and emotions. How was this possible? How was my supposedly dead husband sitting on the same airplane as his son and me, living what appeared to be a completely different life? Was I losing my mind? Was this some kind of breakdown brought on by stress or grief? But Tommy kept insisting it was his daddy, and children don't lie about things like this. They don't have the capacity for the kind of elaborate deception this would require. If Tommy recognized Jake, it was because Jake was really there. The rest of the flight passed in a blur. I tried to keep Tommy entertained and distracted, but inside I was falling apart. I watched Jake like a hawk, memorizing every detail, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. When the flight attendant came by with drinks, I heard him order a ginger ale. Jake had always hated ginger ale and preferred Coke. It was a small detail, but it added to the surreal nature of the whole situation. When we started our descent into Miami, I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to follow Jake and find out what was really going on. I owed it to myself, to Tommy, and to the 3 years of grief and struggle I'd endured as a supposedly widowed single mother. After we landed, I kept my distance, but stayed close enough to watch where Jake went. Tommy was tired and cranky from the flight, asking why we weren't going straight to Aunt Kelly's house like we'd planned. I made up an excuse about needing to stop somewhere first, all while keeping my eyes on the man who should have been dead. Jake and the blonde woman collected their luggage and headed toward the exit. I followed them outside, staying far enough back that they wouldn't notice me, but close enough that I wouldn't lose them in the crowd. They got into a late-model silver sedan, driven by someone else, and I quickly hailed a taxi. "Follow that silver car," I told the driver, feeling ridiculous for saying something I'd only heard in movies. The taxi driver looked at me strangely, but complied when I handed him a $50 bill and said it was urgent. We followed Jake's car through Miami traffic for about 30 minutes, until they pulled into the driveway of a beautiful 2-story house in a nice suburban neighborhood. From the trunk, laughing about something with the blonde woman. That's when I saw something that nearly made me collapse right there on the sidewalk. A toddler, maybe 18 months old, came running out of the house toward Jake. He scooped I had the taxi wait down the street, while I watched Jake get out of the car. He pulled luggage the child up in his arms, spinning around as the little boy giggled with delight. Jake kissed the child's forehead with the same gentle affection I'd seen him show Tommy when he was that age. Jake had another family. Not only was he alive, but he was living a completely different life, with a different wife and a different child. While I'd been struggling to make ends meet, working double shifts as a nurse and raising our son alone, Jake had been playing house with someone else. I directed the taxi driver to take us to my sister's house, my mind reeling with everything I'd discovered. That night, after Tommy was asleep, I told Kelly everything. She was as shocked as I was, but she helped me think through what I should do next. "You have to confront him," she said. "You deserve answers. Tommy deserves to know his father is alive." But I was scared. If Jake had faked his own death, what else was he capable of? Why would someone go to such elaborate lengths to disappear from their old life? Was I in danger? Was Tommy? I spent 2 days wrestling with the decision. I hired a babysitter to watch Tommy and drove back to the house where I'd seen Jake. I sat outside for hours, working up the courage to knock on the door. Finally, I noticed that the silver sedan was gone, and only Jake's pickup truck remained in the driveway. I walked up to the front door and rang the bell, my heart pounding so hard I was sure everyone in the neighborhood could hear it. When Jake opened the door, his face went completely white. For a moment, neither of us said anything. "Lisa," he finally whispered. "Oh God, Lisa." "Hello, Jake," I managed to say. "I think we need to talk." He looked around frantically, then stepped outside and closed the door behind him. "How did you find me? What are you doing here?" "Tommy spotted you on our flight to Miami," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "He kept saying it was his daddy, and I thought he was mistaken until I got a good look at you myself." Jake's shoulders sagged, and suddenly he looked much older than his 34 years. "I can explain," he said. "You better," I replied, "because I've spent the last 3 years thinking you were dead. I went to your funeral, Jake. I cried over your grave. I've been raising your son alone while you've been playing happy family with someone else." He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I remembered so well it made my chest ache. "Can we go somewhere to talk? Somewhere private? I can't let Amanda see you." "Amanda?" "My wife." The word hit me like a physical blow. "Your wife? Jake, I'm your wife. Or I was, until you decided to fake your own death." We ended up at a coffee shop about 10 minutes away. Jake kept looking around nervously, as if he expected someone to jump out and arrest him. When we sat down, he started talking, and the story he told me was so unbelievable, I would have laughed if I hadn't been so angry. According to Jake, he'd gotten involved with some very bad people through gambling. He'd accumulated debts of over $200,000 to a loan shark who'd made it clear that Jake's life, and possibly mine and Tommy's lives, were in danger if he didn't pay up immediately. "I didn't know what else to do," he said. "These weren't the kind of people you negotiate with. They showed me pictures of our house, Lisa. They knew where Tommy went to daycare. They were going to hurt all of us if I didn't come up with the money." He claimed that faking his own death was the only way to protect us. He'd staged the car accident with help from someone he'd met through his gambling connections, someone who specialized in helping people disappear. The burned body in the car belonged to a homeless man who died of natural causes. "I thought you'd be better off without me," he said. "The life insurance money would take care of you and Tommy. You could start over without looking over your shoulder, wondering if dangerous people were going to come after you because of my mistakes." I listened to his explanation with growing fury. "So you let me think you were dead for 3 years? You let your son grow up thinking his father was gone forever? Do you have any idea what we went through?" Jake's eyes filled with tears. "I thought about you and Tommy every single day, but I couldn't contact you without putting you in danger. I had to become someone else completely." "And Amanda?" I asked. "How does she fit into this touching story of self-sacrifice?" He had the grace to look ashamed. "I met her about a year after I moved to Miami. I never meant for it to happen, but I was lonely and scared, and she was kind to me. When she got pregnant, I couldn't just abandon her." "But you could abandon your first family?" "That's not fair," he said. "I did it to protect you." "No," I said, standing up from the table. "You did it to protect yourself. If you'd really wanted to protect us, You would have found another way. You would have gone to the police, or borrowed money from family, or declared bankruptcy. You chose the easy way out, and now you have two families and neither one of them knows the truth about who you really are. Jake reached across the table and grabbed my hand. Please don't tell Amanda. Please. It would destroy her, and Benjamin doesn't deserve to grow up without a father. Benjamin? My son. Our son. I pulled my hand away. Tommy is your son, Jake. Benjamin is the child you had with the woman you married while you were still married to me. We sat in silence for several minutes. Finally, I made my decision. I'm not going to turn you in to the police, I said. Not because you deserve my protection, but because Tommy deserves better than having his father go to prison for insurance fraud. But I want you to do something for me. Jake nodded eagerly. Anything. I want you to set up a trust fund for Tommy's college education. A real one, with enough money to pay for 4 years at any university he chooses. You can afford it. I saw your house and your cars. You're obviously doing well for yourself. Of course, he said. I can do that. And I want you to write him a letter explaining why you had to go away. Something he can read when he's old enough to understand. Don't mention the gambling or the dangerous people. Just tell him that you loved him but couldn't stay and that it had nothing to do with him. Jake agreed to both conditions. We exchanged contact information, and he promised to have the trust fund set up within a week. As I was getting ready to leave, I turned back to him one more time. Jake, does Amanda know about your past at all? He shook his head. She thinks I'm from Oregon and that my family died in a car accident. So you told her a version of the truth, I said. Just reversed the roles. I left him sitting at that coffee shop and drove back to my sister's house. When I got there, Tommy was playing in the backyard with his cousins, laughing and carefree. I watched him through the window and realized that he was better off not knowing the truth about his father. At least not yet. Jake kept his word about the trust fund. Within a week, I received paperwork showing that he'd established an education fund for Tommy with enough money to cover college and graduate school if he chose. The letter for Tommy came a few days later, sealed in an envelope with instructions not to open it until Tommy turned 18. I never told Tommy what really happened. As far as he knows, he was mistaken about seeing his father on the airplane. Children that age have vivid imaginations, and it was easy enough to convince him that his mind had played tricks on him. Tommy is 8 years old now, and he rarely asks about his father anymore. He's a happy, well-adjusted kid who's doing great in school and has lots of friends. Last year, I finally started dating someone, a kind man named Robert, who treats Tommy like his own son. I sometimes wonder what would have happened if I'd made different choices that day in Miami. What if I'd told Amanda the truth about her husband? What if I'd called the police? What if I'd demanded that Jake come back and be a real father to Tommy? But I think I made the right decision. Jake proved that day in the coffee shop that he was a selfish man who would always put his own comfort and safety ahead of his family's needs. Tommy is better off with the memory of a father who died tragically than with the reality of a father who abandoned him. I still have moments when I wonder what Jake's life is like now. Does he ever think about us? Does he feel guilty about the choice he made? Has he told Amanda the truth, or is he still living a lie? But those moments are becoming less frequent. I've learned that some questions don't need answers, and some people don't deserve the space they take up in your thoughts. This story shows us that sometimes the people we trust most can become complete strangers. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have exposed Jake's secret or protected the family he'd built on lies? Let me know in the comments below. If this story moved you, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more incredible true stories that will leave you questioning everything. Don't forget to ring that notification bell. Trust me, You won't want to miss what's coming next. Until next time, remember that truth really is stranger than fiction.